Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, one of my favorite pandemic activities has been mindless channel surfing on the TV. And whenever I happen on one of the Spanish language channels, I always stop for a few seconds to see how much of it I understand. And it brings back memories of my old high school Spanish classes, and especially my high school Spanish teacher, Mr. Smith. Not his real name. I'm changing the names to protect the innocent. And he was an innocent in a way that prevented him from really gaining total control of a classroom full of rowdy students. I think part of his problem in doing so was his own educational background. Mr. Smith went to a very regimented and strict Catholic boys' school, and he liked to tell us how good we had it by telling us stories of his high school Spanish teacher, who was one of those stereotypically strict nuns. To give an example of her teaching methods, one day he said the Spanish word for telephone, telefono, which is actually incorrect because in Spanish the accent is on the second syllable, teléfono. So as soon as he said that, he told him to come up to the front of the room, and then she told him to put his hand out in front. Then she picked up her ruler, and then she said, "It's not pronounced telefono, it's pronounced telefono." So after that, he never mispronounced that word. But after enduring that sort of education, he swore that he would be different when he became a teacher. He would be friendly and supportive, and he would inspire his students' innate love of learning with his passion for the subject. Now, I'm sure in some schools, Mr. Smith's approach would have been ideal. Unfortunately, my high school was definitely not one of those schools. So there, once the students found they could take advantage of him, they did so repeatedly. Now, a lot of the disruptions were just sort of little arguments, petty sassing back and forth. Then the students also like to play some tricks or what you might call practical jokes on him. A lot of them were merely silly and some a little smelly, but I don't have time to go into those today. But probably the meanest and scariest trick that they played on him was he was gone from the classroom for a few moments, and he came in, and everyone else was at the windows yelling, "Johnny fell out the window! Johnny fell out the window!" He was leaning out, and he leaned out too far and he fell. So, of course, Mr. Smith rushed to the window and looked out the window. And of course, the other students had stationed Johnny directly under the classroom window, lying on the floor or lying on the ground like this. So Mr. Smith obviously went, "Oh no!" and rushed down the stairs as fast as he could until he reached Johnny on the ground, where he then had to restrain himself from strangling Johnny himself just to make sure he was dead. But after that, things quieted down. But one of the other teachers, who is a friend of Mr. Smith, warned us, beware the beware the anger of a patient man. And those words came to fruition a while later when, after being gone from the classroom for a few minutes, which obviously he should never have done, again, he came back in and he saw the students at the window again, and they were dangling out an electric fan out the window by its cord, so giving the students in the classroom directly underneath a real visual sideshow. So for some reason, This was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back of Mr. Smith's tolerance, perhaps because it was disrupting another class. But after he reeled the fan back inside the classroom, he picked up the chair and he slammed it on the ground, and it bounced all the way and against the opposing wall. And then he went behind his desk, which was one of those big heavy desks that you saw in classrooms one day, and he lifted up the edge, and with one big heave, he tipped over the desk and it slammed on the ground with a big bang, and papers flew all over the place. And then he sat down on his chair, only without the desk in front of him, and just sort of stared at the ceiling. After a few minutes, one of the students started picking up one of the papers that had fallen in front of him, and then all the students got up and they gathered up all the papers from that were strewn all over the room, and then they uprighted the desk and they put the papers back in little piles on his desk. And after another minute, Mr. Smith then picked up this chalk and started talking about conjugation like nothing had happened. So after that climactic event, I would love to say that it was not only a catharsis, but an epiphany where everybody went, we really should be better than this. And they turned over a new leaf and put their noses to the grindstone and seized the day to achieve ever greater heights of achievement and learning. But I'm afraid that once the next day rolled around, everything was pretty much back to normal for the rest of the year. Fast forward to the present. Yesterday, for the very first time, I thought of looking up Mr. Smith in Google, under his real name, of course. And the first entry was in ratemyprofessors.com. Apparently, he had been teaching Spanish at some local university, and all the student reviewers loved him. They said that he was such a nice guy and he had such a passion for learning. So I'm really glad that Mr. Smith did find a situation that was more suited for his talents. And for myself, I think back and I wish that even though I myself never participated in any of the shenanigans myself, I wish I had did more to help out Mr. Smith in his efforts to educate us. But back then, I followed the Spanish phrase that Mr. Smith did manage to teach us, which is mañana, mañana. So, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests, and James especially. James, it's been a real pleasure having you give so many speeches back to back as you try to finish up your path, so to say. And it's really been great to hear the different topics that you're speaking on. And today was especially great because you shared a story specific to you, and it gave us a little bit of information about your upbringing and some of the experiences that you've gone through. And I thought that was great. So first, I want to say that you did a great job standing up during your speech, doing the things, the little things that help speeches really excel. So you did a lot of good hand movement, hand placement. Your words that you used to describe the story were great. The imagery that you used was great. I feel like I was in the classroom when the kid was hanging by the window or when the teacher flipped over the table. I can envision that right in my mind as you were describing it. So the words that you used and the imagery that you used in your speech was just amazing. I really did enjoy it, and I think it had a good impact on the speech. So starting off, talking about how you even thought on this topic, surfing through your channels, as we're all trying to get through this COVID. So many of us are just sitting at home and watching so many different TV shows. I've run out of TV shows and movies to watch, so I too try to reach out to different things. But, just talking about your memories and your specific teacher and the things that he went through, how his experiences shaped the way in which he taught a class, and then ultimately how, even though the way he taught the class, the things that he learned from his old teacher, he probably should have applied to how he was teaching the current class, but yet he stuck to his ideals. And even though it didn't turn out to be the best, he stuck with trying to do things in his view, which was the better way. He viewed it as doing things in a better way. So I thought it was really nice that in his story, he stuck to his ideals. And then ultimately, at the end, it turned into a little bit of a feel-good story, because although we felt bad about the teacher being treated a certain way, it was nice to see the students sort of realize that in some sense, even though they went back to their ways. And then even in the end, to hear that he finally was in a classroom where his students actually respected and appreciated the different approach that he brought to teaching, I thought that was great. So because of his evaluation, I guess I have to say something that could help potentially improve. And I'm not sure about the background of this specific project that you're working on, but one thing that I was left desiring a little bit after hearing the speech was to learn a little bit more about how this experience affected you. I know at the end you talked about how, you wish, looking back, you wish you might have said something a little bit to stick up for the teacher or do a little bit more to show your appreciation for him. But I would have liked to learn a little bit more about your reactions in the moment when you've seen these things happening. And then as you progressed into your career, was there anything that you took from this experience that you applied to the way in which you interact at your job, or if it impacted your life in any way? So all in all, you had a great speech. Again, it's been really great for me to be able to listen to all the different topics you touched on. You're a great speaker, and I enjoyed this speech, and I look forward to many more. So great job. Thank you.